folks, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Natasha and I do book things here. Today's video is going to be my September wrap-up, which I actually ended up reading more books than I thought I would in the month of September. If my hair is looking especially light and damaged, it's because I just bleached my roots and wow, that's not a good look. I need to, just gonna let this sit for a couple days while my scalp stops burning. We're just gonna put that hat right back on there. Well, I'm going to include my monthly stats. I like tracking them just to see, I don't know, how much I'm reading, feel accomplished. So this month I ended up reading 13 books, but a lot of them were very, very big books. And I read a couple things that were over 500 pages, that were very close, like over 450, which at that point it's a tome to me. So yeah, I ended up reading 13 books and that equaled out to 4,917 pages, equals to about 164 pages a day. I also was listening to audiobooks while I did a lot of like housework and wedding DIY stuff, kind of where those extra pages add up. Star ratings are as follows. I actually have one 1-star book, one 2-star book, two 3-star books. That's hard to say. 5 4-star books, and then actually 4 5-star books. I read some really, really good stuff in this month, and then a lot of things that I liked enough to give them 4s. I like ending on a good note, so I'm going to talk about my least favorite book first. I might actually rant about this book because I hate it. The book that I absolutely hate, 1-star book to me, is November 9 by Colleen Hoover. This book is that these, young couple meet and they have to separate, like she's going somewhere else and he's staying there, whatever. And they agree to meet every year for 5 years on November 9th because she's kind of scared of love and committing, and then he's an author and decides to write about their love story, about them meeting every November 9th. My issue with this is that the male character in this book is such an absolute sack of shit fuckboy. It's not that it's a bad book, it's not that it's that poorly written, it's just his character is just the worst. I really don't think that Colleen Hoover intended for him to be so problematic, but to me, I just read this and was cringing and just, some of it was just bad. I really think, like, I marked so much of this up because, like, it's just, no. I need to make a whole video about this because I want to spoil it and I want to just talk about it and how much it upset me. So this one line in it just sort of like, just irritates me. They're about to go on a date and for some reason this guy she met 3 seconds ago is back at her apartment, and so they're helping to pick out like something for her to wear. And so it says, his eyes fall to the dress he initially picked out and pulls it off the hanger and shoves it at me. But I want you to wear this one. I shoved the dress back at him. I don't want to wear that, I want to wear this. No, he said, I'm paying for dinner so I get to choose what to stare at while we eat. Like, get fucked. Like, you're a sack of shit. What, you're paying for dinner so you get to decide if I dress like a slut for like your liking? Like, fuck you, man. 3 pages later, he's undressing her and she's really uncomfortable by it, and it says, this is going too far, too far, too far, too far, but all I can do is suck in a wild breath and let his fingers pop open the button on my jeans, because as much as I wish he would stop, I get the feeling he's not undressing me for pleasure. I'm not sure what he's doing, but I'm too immobile to ask. Like, is that supposed to be sexy? Girl, no. 3 pages later, he says, I barely know you, so I'm not gonna argue with you over your lack of intelligence because you could very well be as dumb as a rock, but at least you're pretty. Anyway, I'm not gonna continue this. I hated this, and I hated how it ended. I hated Ben as a character. Here's the thing, I respect other people's opinions, but it worries me that this book is so highly rated and people are like, it's a beautiful romantic love story, and all I want to do is just be like, honey, who hurt you? This is not romantic to me. This is not how men should be treating women. And 1 star. Fuck that. Nope. Up next is my 2-star book for the month. This is Suicide Notes from Beautiful Girls. So it follows her main character, who's friends with a girl named Delia, and she was sort of like friends but then not friends for a period of time. Delia ends up dying in like a fire, and our main character is convinced that it was a murder and not a fire, and you come to just find out what happened. It was just like super weird. At one point she ends up in this weird like drug den. You're like, okay. It goes over in this direction where you're like, okay. And then it gets a little cultish, but then that wasn't flushed out, so I'm like, okay. And it wraps up and the ending happens and I'm just like, okay. It was just weird, but like not in a good way, and there was just too many like ways that the plot was going that I didn't care about or didn't feel like putting my effort into following. It just felt very like scattered, so didn't really like this too much. It's just kind of odd, so it was a 2. So a 3-star book for me was Mosquito Land by David Arnold. It was just okay. Definitely not my favorite road trip book by any means. What was kind of interesting about this though was the main character was dealing with a little bit of mental illness and talks about her not taking her medication for that and like the choice behind that. The thing that I had issues with this book, which is why I didn't rate it a 4 or it wasn't a 5 for me, the environment wasn't graphic enough for me. It was just, it felt like it was too scattered in what they were doing. It was like, this happened, and then boom, we're here, and then boom, we're here, and then boom, this character is introduced, and like, okay, this character's here. And none of it felt cohesive. I feel like if the author would have taken out maybe like 2 or 3 of the big things that they did in the story, it would have felt a little bit more cohesive, and then those plot points would have like a nice sort of like roundedness to them. One thing I did like about this though is that there is a character introduced that she does have a crush on, like, hey, I am too old for you, because she's 16 and he's I think 22. And it's obvious that, like, you know, there might be something there, but there's also that conversation of like, I'm too old for you. Nothing can happen from this for now, which I thought was really intelligent, and then sort of really amplified their friendship after the fact. It wasn't like, oh, that's the final conversation that they're having. So that I liked. It just, there was like a couple parts in this where I was just like, wait, what? Like, what's going on? It jumped around a little bit too much. I enjoyed it. Again, I love road trip books, but I just felt like it needed slightly better writing and a little bit of editing to make this like a 4 or 5-star book for me. The other 3-star book this month was an audiobook that I finished, and this is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I just picked up on audiobook because I have the Libby app, so I kind of just like went, oh, this is like 6 hours, I can do this easily, to it quickly, and just say that I read another book this month, basically. I didn't really know what this was going into it, and I didn't realize that there was any sort of fantasy element into it, so I'm listening to it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, what the fuck just happened? This book is strange. It's my first Neil Gaiman book, and I like that it was narrated by him. He's got a great voice, and I like it when authors read their own work. I think that's awesome. You're following the story of a man who's remembering a series of events from his childhood, so it does have that childhood like whimsical sort of element to it, but it's also an adult little kid narrator, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I'm describing that well, but a series of things happen. I'm not even going to talk about them because they're so bizarre and weird that like you almost have to read the book, because if I even talk about it, it's kind of like, what? To me, this talks a lot about childhood perspective, and like the things that you think you're seeing. The whole fantasy element added in was just like weird. I think it's because I didn't know it was fantasy. I had like no idea what was coming, and so at one point there's this like graphic description of like a parasite kind of thing, and I'm listening to it like, ugh. I was actually like folding socks when I listened to this like one part, and I'm like, ugh. It gave me the heebs-jeebs. That was perfect for a little bit of like a creepy fall vibe. There's really beautiful like scenery in the book as well, but definitely go into this book not knowing what it's about and see if you like it, because it was interesting. So I gave it 3 stars. I can't really tell you much more about that because it's short, so read it because if you're interested, because it's weird. Alright, so moving on to 4-star books. The first 4-star book that I read this month was the first book that I read this month, which was The Diviners by Libra Bray. This book is huge. This is like almost 600 pages. It took me like 5 days to read this at the beginning of the month. This follows the main character of Evie. It's set in the 1920s. There's a lot of fun, like occult, weird elements to it. Like her uncle owns like an occult museum, which is like super cool. Because it's set in the 20s, it has all that slang and a lot of different characters. One thing that I loved about this book was the diversity of characters. I like that there is a talk about race that goes on in this book, being like a black male in the 1920s. I think that was really interesting and like a very, very cool perspective. So you're following Evie and a couple other characters as there's this serial killer going around in the city who are taking out people for like very specific reasons. I liked following sort of like this character behind the serial killer. There's definitely parts of this that were very eerie and very creepy and kind of spooky as well. Like, I think this is a great October book. It just has that like sense of dread for like a lot of it, but it's also really cool. Now, another thing that I loved about this was the serial killer in the book is sort of like a paranormal figure and supernatural figure, but it sounds very much like it's inspired by H.H. Holmes. There's a serial killer who had like a creepy like torture house and stuff. So like I remember like starting it and going, oh yeah, it's H.H. Holmes, like you know, really feeling that reference. And then a lot of the 20s references I got as well. If you like 20s cultures and you like sort of like H.H. Holmes, like true crime kind of vibe, pick this up. It is so good and I'm so happy I read this. I do have the second book and I will be picking up the third one as well. So definitely probably going to be one of my new favorite series. So next we have a thriller, which was a 4-star book for me. This is What She Knew by Gillian Macmillan. So this follows your main character who is on a walk in the woods with her 8-year-old son, and she looks away for a moment and then her son is gone, kidnapped, and it follows the case of them trying to figure out like all the connections that the kid had with adults and who might have done it. And you're introduced to a lot of different people and the book kind of takes you down one way and then down another way. I didn't entirely see the ending. I had an inkling it could have been the person that it was, but the final way that it was revealed I didn't expect at all. It was very, very interesting, and like I found as the page, like this is also quite a long book. Let me see here, like 450 pages. I felt that again this book could have been shorter and it could have been wrapped up a little bit nicer. I don't know. Typically I don't like thrillers when there's too much focus on like the police force and them actually trying to like solve the case. But this one was actually really good because there was a really interesting perspective from the mother and the media and how the media sort of blames her for things that happened, and then also focuses on family. And I just like the different ways that it took you, and you kind of focused on like, you know, red herring here and like takes you on a different path here. It's a weird sentence, but if you're into a good kidnapping book that really leaves you sort of questioning who done it until the last like 100 pages, 50 pages even, this one was quite good. I gave this one a solid 4. I enjoyed it. Up next I read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. This was probably the biggest surprise for me this month. I actually bought this brand new, which typically I don't buy new books, but I ended up getting some gift cards, which I want to have a story time video about. We'll talk about that. But this follows the main character Eleanor, which is my mom's name spelled that way and everything, so like I feel like I have to get a book that has Eleanor in it, and there's quite a few lately that have Eleanors as main characters. I find that really weird, but anyway. So this follows the main character of Eleanor, who is a true eccentric. She definitely has some like social issues and different behaviors, and you can tell from like very early on in the book that there was something that happened to her in her childhood that sort of caused her to be the way she is now. The thing with this though is the entire book I felt like this sort of dread about what had happened to her in her childhood, and they really leave you guessing the entire book like what exactly that detail is. And so the whole time that she's sort of describing what might have happened and you're given like little clues here and there, it's just, you feel this like, just I felt like just sense of like what is it, like what did happen the whole book until it's sort of revealed near the very, very end what happened. So Chelsea from Chelsea Darling Reads compared this a lot to The Rosie Project, which I hated The Rosie Project, so I was really worried that I was gonna hate this. I can see the similarities in the sort of like eccentric brains of both of those characters, but this is very, very different from that book in my opinion. I found her character so likable, and I don't know, man, like it was just the growth of her character I thought was perfect, and the friendships that she makes, and like at one point she gets a cat and it's like the most perfect thing. The only thing that I can say about this was I kind of saw the ending coming when it's revealed what had happened and how her brain is working out what happened in her past. I could kind of see that a little bit. I don't want to say I got it 100%, but I had like a feeling at one point that I'm like, oh, I wonder if this is what's going on. And I was kind of right. I thought this was just excellent. I highly recommend this. Again, this is really a 4.5 to me. It's just not a perfect book because I didn't quite like the ending. I think I actually want to reread this like now. Like I just read it and I want to turn around and reread it and see if I like it anymore. There's one part of this that I really liked as she's sort of like on her road to becoming a well-rounded, you know, I don't know, normal human being, if you will. It was nice to be out despite the wind. I decided to walk instead of taking the bus, enjoying what remained of the sun. There are plenty of other people with the same idea. It felt good to be a part of a throng, and I took gentle pleasure in mingling. I dropped 20 pence into the paper cup of a man sitting on the pavement with a very attractive dog. I smiled at a spectacularly ugly baby who was shaking his fist at me from a garish pushchair. Noticing details, that was good. Tiny slivers of life, they all added up and helped you to feel that you too could be a fragment, a little piece of humanity who usefully filled a space, however minuscule. I was pondering this as I waited for the lights to change. Beautiful writing, and I loved her character, and I honestly, like I said, I really think that I should read this again, and now that I know the ending, if I read it again, it might actually be a 5-star book for me. So I highly suggest this. If you guys have been interested in this book, check it out. So as you can tell, I've been trying to read books that have like a little bit more of a spook to them because I'm going to be mostly gone in October, so I'm trying to get in my spook now. This book creeped me the fuck out. So this is Karin Slaughter's The Good Daughter. Oh boy, I don't even know how to describe this. It is a thriller. It is very dark. Now, I mentioned in one of my videos that there are major trigger warnings for this book. It is very graphic. I'm gonna put like a trigger warning again for graphic sexual violence, rape, murder, family murder, very claustrophobic feel. There's also a school shooting in this. There's a lot of fucked up shit. There's just a lot of fucked up shit. I ended up reading the beginning of this in the bathtub and had to like get out of the tub. Like I couldn't handle like reading this in that relaxing place because it just took me into like a panic state. The way that the story folds out was very, 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 very interesting and very dark and very twisted. The only reason for me that it's a 4, not a 5, I felt like there was a lot that happened in the beginning that was really like, whoa. And then there was about 300 pages where it was just kind of like important to the story, yes, but it was just kind of slow where not a lot happened, and then it got really crazy at the end again. This is actually like a 500-page book. It doesn't look like it is because I didn't think it was, and it's actually over 500 pages, so it takes a little while to get it through. But the story is very, very good, and I feel like if you're reading this and you're stuck in that middle part of the book, just continue through because it gets fucking twisted and graphic and dark. So if that's what you're into, that's what it is. But if you're triggered by any of the things I mentioned, stay far, far away because you're going to be very upset at this. Like, yeah. It was a little much even for me. Last 4-star book was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This is what I ended up listening to on audiobook. I'm not going to go too much into it. A lot of people know what this book is about by now. There's also a very awesome plot point in this. Thing is that I already know everything about this book before I bought it because I watched the movie like 12 times. It's one of my favorite movies. I love Amy Dunn as a character. I think she's fascinating and like so well written. So I was excited to sort of get a little bit more that the movie didn't show, which is exactly what I got from the audiobook. So I feel like it was a really good audiobook for me to complete because I already knew a lot of the stories, so it was easy for me to listen along. So yeah, this is just a 4-star for me, probably because I already knew what was going on. I think if I wasn't aware of like the major twist that happens at the end, then it would be a 5-star book for me, but the movie to me is 5 stars. The book is a 4 because I kind of already knew what happened. So moving into 5-star books, the first one that I absolutely loved, no surprise, because I finally read more Morgan Matson. First one that I read this month was Since You've Been Gone. Oh man, this was so cute. I fucking love this. This was just a perfect summer book. I love this so much. I've just sort of realized that Morgan Matson has very quickly become my favorite teenage YA writer in terms of writing flushed out teenage adventures. Just describing that feeling of I'm gonna go do this and I don't know really what's gonna happen, but I'm there. And it's like literally describing how I felt as a teenager. That's what she managed to achieve with a lot of the things that she's done in this, like, and all of her books, like, and all of the ones that I've read. So she just writes teenagers to me perfectly. And the adventures that they have, like, I don't know, and like that seems simple. Like, I've read other road trip, like, accomplishing list books, like take Mosquitoland, for example, where I just felt it wasn't an accurate teenage thought process, but Morgan Matson does that. Like, she just writes teenagers fantastically. So this isn't exactly a road trip book. A little bit of it is, kind of feels like it is, but this is just like a perfect summer adventure. The girl's best friend leaves for reasons you don't really know, and she's trying to figure out why she's gone as well. She leaves a list of 13 things for her friend to do over the summer. Now, I thought it was going to be really cheesy when I found out that it was just going to be like, oh, she accomplished and oh, checks off all this bullshit. Ended up being so well done, and I love that you know the list ahead of time, but it's not like she jumped 1, 2, 3, 4. She did certain things and, like, you know, failed at a couple of them and then revisits them, and the way that she checks off these items on the list were not ways that I thought that she was going to, so there's a little bit of a surprise there with some of them. It was just like everything nice and wrapped up in a book, so I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I like inhaled this book. It was awesome. 5 stars. Loved it. Loved it. So next 5-star book was one that I've been meaning to get to forever. This is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I feel like there's not much more that I can say about this book that hasn't already been said. It just deals with topics that, like, need to be discussed in books more. That is all I need to say. I said it briefly in another video where I was reading this and felt like, oh yeah, this is something that happens in, you know, culture now. Why is there not 1,000 books already talking about this? I feel like this is almost the first one that got people aware of the subject matter, where, like, I don't know, I feel like this topic should be in a lot of books, like, because it's something that happens. This is people's real life, and that's what I found just, like, amazing about the book, was it describes things accurately, and it's sad, and it's like not necessarily like a super pleasant, you know, story from the get-go, and you know that it's not going to be. One thing I will say though is the writing of the parents in this book were just amazing. The parents are like, her dad especially is just like such a great character, beautiful character, and yeah, just the whole community and the way it's described is awesome. I marked it up with annotations, but it's just too good for me to read any of them. So despite the subject matter, there is a lot of really good humor in this as well, when it is a little bit lighter. And yeah, this is just a book that I feel like every person should read, and this should get in the hands of teens all over. I think it should be like a mandatory read in high schools right now. That's truly how I feel. I'm excited for anything else that Angie Thomas releases in the future. She plans on releasing more books because for being a debut novel, this is like just... So the next book that I gave 5 stars was the other Morgan Matson book that I read this month. I felt like I needed more, and this is one that I wanted to finish before summer kind of ended. This is Second Chance Summer, and when I tell you that I cried at this book, like, oh, this again was a bathtub book for me. I've been spending a lot of time relaxing and trying to like de-stress, you know, lately, but this is a book that I read mostly in the bathtub, and I thank God that I did, because I wept so hard. I thought if someone walked in on me right now, they'd be like, girl, are you okay? And I'd be like, no. So this follows a teenage girl and her family as they go back up for one last summer up to their lake house. Her father is terminal and is dying. So the entire time that's in the back of your head while she's dealing with like love and friendship and all of that summery crap. You kind of have that impending doom in the back of your head, and the relationship with the parents are great. The relationship with like the people in the community is great. The teenage point of view is great. Like, there's a dog in here that's cute as fuck. It's just everything about this is cute, well written, and then the way that she deals with that heavy topic at the end was just like, oh my god, like the feels were so strong. Like, I'm talking snot driplets, like just dripping out of my face. Like, I was like hyperventilating, crying. It was super emotional because the way that she's written the characters for the entire book makes it like hard-hitting. Like, that's what it is. It's just like they're great people. You can see these people in your head as like you're reading about the family and like what happens. And yeah, it was very emotional. And like I said, Morgan Matson writes teenagers perfectly. Excited to read, what is it, The Unexpected Everything, I think is what it's called. I know people are kind of about that one, but I really like the rest of her work, so I'm willing to give it a try. But this was just absolutely beautiful. If you're looking for a summer book that does have a little bit of loss in there as well, and you want a good cry, the last 5-star book of the month was one that Jeff got me in a McDonald's Happy Meal, and that is Franklin's Halloween. And this book is fucking lit. Franklin just goes on a Halloween adventure. You can bet that I count the 32 pages of this in my final numbers. I loved it. It made me very happy, and I loved it. So Franklin's Halloween, 5 out of 5. That is my very long, very chatty wrap up for the month of September. You know down below how many books you read in the month of September. If you're interested in any of the ones that I've read, if you've read any of the ones that I've read. Not sure how many books I'll read in the month of October, but I will try. And I will likely be back with my wrap up mid-November, I want to say. I'm going to give myself some time once I get back from all the hecticness of October. Hopefully you guys are doing good, and until my next video, I'll talk to all of you soon.